I'm Bree, one of the co-founders of Frank Body.
Hi, I'm Jess, one of the co-founders of Frank Body.
Welcome to Selfish, a podcast that is all about putting yourself first and redefining the word selfish.
Over this content series, we're exploring a variety of topics with some amazing faces that you'll know, from self-awareness with Brooke Blurton to self-discovery with Jackie Gillies.
We're also talking about self-pleasure with Chantel Otten and self-wealth with the incredible Victoria Devine.
Podcast episodes for Selfish drop weekly on Tuesdays, alongside a whole bunch of amazing tools, tips and tricks from our team that you can find across the Frank Body social channels.
Find us wherever you listen to your podcasts, and let's get selfish together.
Welcome to Selfish by Frank Body, everybody. We have just finished an incredible conversation with Brooke Blurton.
Brooke Blurton is a youth worker, a queer and Indigenous advocate, a podcaster, and a media personality. You might know her from The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, but she is so much more than that.
It's a really amazing discussion around a journey of self-discovery, self-identity, and how that ultimately leads to how we cultivate self-awareness. We do want to give a trigger warning for this episode. There are mentions of suicide and domestic violence. It's a really beautiful chat with Brooke, and we hope you enjoy it.
So many days feeling cold and too lonely, sitting all the time living in.
Hi Brooke, welcome to Selfish.
Thanks for having me.
We're really excited to have this conversation. We both watched your incredible TED Talk earlier, and in that you spoke about the importance of thinking about how you introduce yourself and not letting other people define your story. So in the spirit of that, I would love for you to introduce yourself.
So I'm Brooke Blurton. I'm a proud Noongar Yamaji woman that comes from the West Australian part. Not many people get there, but it's my favourite place in the world. And I'm a youth worker. I'm 29, nearly 30. Yeah.
How do you feel about turning 30?
I'm actually really excited. I think everyone says that 30s are your best times. And I think you do the work in your 20s, and then 30s, it's much easier.
20s are a shit show. Let's
Right?
be totally
I
honest.
agree.
It's the theme of today, hasn't it?
Has it? Oh, God.
We had the beautiful Rushi Page in earlier, and she's also just recently turned 30, and we were reflecting on how we felt when we turned that age, and our next milestone birthday being 40 in a couple of years. I'm like, I love getting older. I just feel so much better
I think
about
it's
life.
a privilege.
It is
Yeah,
a privilege.
100%. When I think about, I guess, like people that I may have like crossed paths with who are, in their 30s, they're just like thriving. And I'm like, I want that.
You just don't have time for bullshit anymore.
Exactly.
That's what I'm excited
Yeah.
for. I feel like when I turn 40, I'm going to hopefully not give as many fucks.
Yeah, zero fucks given.
At the moment, I still care too much about certain things.
100%.
And I'm hoping that just starts to slowly
Dissipate.
Dissipate.
Yeah.
Over the years.
So you are a youth worker, and I would love to unpack that a bit more, because I think it can be glossed over, or people don't necessarily understand what it means and what you do.
Yeah.
Tell us what you do.
Yeah,
What is
well, I guess, I do a bunch of other things, but I
Yes.
think the one thing that I'm most passionate about is youth work. And I think because of the young people that I work with, I think for me, when I put myself back into when I was younger, I would have loved someone who kind of was like this role model who kind of gave me like life tips and was there and supported me. So I'm kind of like, I went into this industry because I felt I wanted to be the person that I needed the most.
Yep.
So youth work for me is like probably, it's just I wake up thinking about it, I go to sleep thinking about it. And a lot of people think that I just do social media like full time, but I actually work at a boarding house. So I work for an organisation called Melbourne Indigenous Transition School. And basically that transitions young kids from remote and rural areas all over Australia to Melbourne so that they can receive an education and, fulfill their dreams and aspirations. So youth work for me is just like seeing young people thrive. So seeing them live such a better quality of life. I mean, the start of my life probably wasn't as youthful and as great. I had to grow up pretty quickly. But I guess the power of role modeling for me was so important in my early stages of life, because it just provided me with such perspective and exposure, and it kind of like pulled me out of what my environment was.
Yep.
And I think for me, I know some of these kids' experiences because I've actually done them and been through it all.
Yep.
So for me, I feel like I've got the skills and the tools that I've learned in my 20s to kind of, you know, help them navigate the same things. So youth work, you know, it's kind of like a you know, community service job. So you've got like youth work, social work, community support workers. So like they're all sort of in the same realm. And a youth worker for me, like I'm actually, my role is boarding coordinator. But as long as I'm working with young people, like that's pretty much it. Like that's my job.
Awesome.
Yeah. I love it. It's actually so fun.
You light up when you talk about it. It's pretty cool.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I've like, even though I'm in like, you know, 29, early 30, kids think I'm so much younger. And I think because I like to, you know, I'm small. So I sort of like am the same size as them. Like, you know, I'm walking around and I think people look at us, they're like, who's that like adult? Like they're trying to like scan and like pan who's like the supervisor of all these kids, which is also a blessing and a curse. But I mean, for me, I think I still can relate to them, even though I'm much older. And I also think like if I'm getting told that I look 18, that's a
Take
slay.
it, baby.
That
Yeah.
is a slay.
100% take it.
How do you go about maintaining a sense of community in that organisation? You know, a lot of Indigenous kids coming and leaving their home. Is that a big priority within the?
It is
Boarding
like
house?
our top
Yep.
thing that we value the most. And we call ourselves a family, basically, because amongst the chaos, you know, I've got 11 girls, 11 boys. They're all in one house. Obviously, they're separated, but we're all family. We all eat together. We all go to things together. So for me, that actually gives me my part of community instead, because obviously I'm back, you know, I'm away from home.
Yep.
I'm away from country. I'm away from community. So this is like my, you know, not my fill-in, because like they're not just like fill-ins. They don't just come in, but it kind of gives me that sense of community because, you know, I go to work and I love it. And it's like I've got like 11 little sisters and brothers, basically. Yeah. So community is really big for the kids, and it's really good because at any time they want to go home, we send them home.
Yeah,
like
great.
it's no like, we don't give any like fluff, you know, like, oh, you can't go home because of money or funding or anything. Like we make it happen. If they're homesick, like that is a calling for that. They need that. And so we allow that at any point. And I think I should probably like practice that as well, because sometimes I get definitely homesick. There's just this real pull for community and culture and country sometimes with most First Nations people, because it sucks being away from home.
Yeah.
But it's such a sacrifice to work and to, I guess, you know, take opportunities.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can only imagine that constant push-pull for something that is ingrained generationally over thousands of years, and then, trying to mesh that with like a modern version of life. Must be,
It's like a whole, like, you know, if you've listened to my TED Talks, I sort of navigate the walking in two worlds.
Yes.
It's
I
like,
do remember you saying that.
where do you belong? And that was kind of talking to race, I guess, because I really struggled with that with self-identity when I was much younger, because I have a white dad and a black mum. And so, you know, and my mum has, you know, she's, you know, she's biracial, so she has two cultures. And I really struggled because I guess like in the Aboriginal community, I'd go to my dad and I was quite articulate and quite like inquisitive, and a lot of my, you know, peers thought that was like, you're too good for us kind of thing, and like that was called like tall poppy syndrome. They try to bring you down.
Yep.
And then the same happened, I guess, like in the wider community when I went to a different school in the city. It happened to me there. So it's just like this confusion that young people go through. It's like, where do I belong?
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, we're talking to like self. Like self-awareness is so powerful in that, because, you know, the more you know about yourself and the more you know about who you are and your identity, I think it helps you navigate the world much easier.
Yeah.
You just don't give two shits about things that don't matter. Yeah. And I think, you know, self-awareness is knowledge. And it's not just also about yourself, like understanding how other people work. Because I find like people so interesting through this industry.
Of course.
Kids is like so funny to watch. Like you just sit them and you're like, like, what are you doing? Like,
are you
just,
thinking?
yeah.
Yeah,
And
they're
I
weird.
just like people watch with them, and then I do the same with adults, and I'm like, you guys are so like, I just love people watching, I guess.
I love a good people watching
Yeah.
session too.
I always wear sunnies. Like, people always think that I'm like really sassy because I always have sunnies on inside, but I'm like, I'm just people watching, and I don't want to give off like these vibes that I'm like being judgy. I just love like watching people.
It's so fascinating.
Especially at the tennis currently. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, you were
Tennis
saying the
is-
same thing the other day. Like the type of people around you at the tennis you were finding so
loving it.
fascinating.
So interesting. Going back to self-awareness, I think that's something that you cultivate over years. But for anyone who's, I guess, younger or going through that phase of trying to work out who they are or how to become more self-aware, do you have any tips?
Be curious. I mean, you have to be curious to actually want to learn more about yourself. I mean, I think people over glamorize this like self journey kind of thing. You know, it's like about journaling and like doing yoga and Pilates, you know, like that is a really kind of like pretty niche way to like to explore what self
Yeah.
looks like. But I think, you know, discovering self-awareness and understanding yourself can be a little bit ugly. It's like unpacking things that you probably haven't surfaced for a very long time. I mean, I'm learning more about myself every day, I think, and you do in relationships, in career. I think my tips would probably be like, don't be scared to kind of face the ugly. I think the second thing for me would be like, just know that like the more you know about yourself, the more you know about people, I think it would just help you navigate just life a little bit easier. It's not going to always be easy. Like, we know that life is, things are not like they're linear, like they go up and down.
Definitely.
So, yeah, I mean, self-awareness for me was just like knowing my place and being like, okay, like I've got, you know, I'm this little girl, this little brown girl, and I've got this crazy platform. I've like work in this really awesome like youth work experience. Like, what do I have to offer really to people, to my family, to my community? Like, what can I give? But that all came from like curiosity when I was younger. I just think I live in my head, but I think like my last tip, if I could give like one more, would be like just kind of get out of your head a little bit. Because you're always like cycling up here. It's literally like that little monkey that's just like
Yep.
The symbols.
constantly like the symbols. And
feel that,
sometimes like just put the symbols down and just like try and find some peace and quiet. I mean, it's hard. It's easier than, you know, said than done. But like I try actively, like when I'm like in my head that I haven't even said anything out loud for like hours, I'm like, oh my God, like I need to go have a conversation with someone. Like I need to go for a walk. So
Yeah.
I'm practicing like saying things outward, you know, and podcast really helps. Like every week I do a
Yeah.
podcast with my mate, and, you know, we've learned and like, you know, had revelations over the year in our podcast because we've said things out loud,
Yeah.
which is so strange.
You unpack them.
Yeah, you get it out. And then I said to him, like, I think it was only just last night, I was like, imagine if we didn't have a podcast or we didn't have each other. Imagine all the revelations that we would have missed along the journey because we didn't speak about it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's so incredible.
So,
Version
like,
of
talk it
therapy.
out, you know?
It is. It really
Yeah.
is. I think what you said before about learning to sit with the difficult
Oh, yeah.
or the ugly things, I've always really struggled with that. And learning how to sit in that and feel that uncomfortable sensation and kind of move through it, I think is something that's important for everyone to do. Your childhood was obviously quite traumatic. Do you
some of it.
mind talking a bit more about your experiences when you were younger, growing up with a mum who had a struggle with addiction? And
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess like the first 11 years of my life were pretty tough. And they sort of got more tough to get better, I think. So like, you know, you can imagine like a line, it got, you know, it was pretty stagnant and then got worse and then kind of got better. And now I'm kind of like, you know, on my own journey. But the early stages, I guess, this is what makes me really grateful now, I guess, being an adult, is that the stages between 0 and 7 are really important for a young person's development and brain and self-awareness and to understand their place. And so I actually don't remember any between that time, but they actually, in that time, you establish your core values. And so now as an adult, I'm realizing what I've established, like what my core values were established in that time. And it's really hard and it's really difficult because I'm realizing things more in relationships and how I develop relationships that are pretty problematic for me, like personally. Like I find it really hard to trust and like stuff like that. So my childhood was pretty like, I mean, if anyone's sort of read my book or read my story or read articles, would know that my mum, bless her, she suffered from a lot of addiction problems. She had really sort of turmoil, mental health, like up and down. I didn't have a relationship much with my dad, but he was there and around. And I guess, you know, that in itself just plays such a big part in a young girl's life as well, you know, not too sure like where to go. So when I was 11, my mum actually passed away and my nan not long after as well. And so they were two of the most closest women I had, most influential women, I guess. Like I had them my whole life up until then. And then I just lost them within like, I think it was like a month. And it's really hard because like, you know, when you get older, you think like all these great things are happening and you just wish that they were there. And then you just wish like, one day I'll get married or maybe one day I'll have my first child, and you like, you know that they're not going to be there. So that part is difficult. But when I think about my childhood, like the moments, I just try to, I guess, remember the nice memories and create more memories as I get older to sort of like override the turmoil, I guess. But, you know, I didn't understand mental health back then when I was much younger. But now working in it and seeing it, I can understand like where it comes from. So, you know, a lot of Aboriginal people experience a lot of psychological distress, and that's kind of intergenerational through the years, especially post-colonisation. So for me, it was very prominent and very distinct that was a direct impact. My nana was actually in a mission. She wasn't allowed an education, therefore she never worked. So then, you know, when she had children, they were just making ends. Like, you know, like just they were making a little go a long way. And I can imagine like would just be like such a hard place to be in and such tough times, I think. Like, and so I don't hold any blame towards my mum or my nan. My nan was just really sick. She was getting much older. She had diabetes, heart problems, like, you know, lung cancer. Like bless her, she was like this fierce woman, but she put on this front because of how unwell she was. And I think that's also what I've learned is like not trying to be something just to make everyone feel okay sometimes. Like if you're not well, just like say that you're not unwell. Yeah. And then my mum, you know, she was obviously struggling too, but she didn't speak about it, or she showed it, but showed it in probably not the nicest of ways. So I don't hold any blame or any like hate or anything. Like I just think, you know, if I could put myself in their shoes, they were just trying to do the best that they could with what they could. And, you know, they just obviously had some experiences that really impacted them and their lives. Which then obviously follows down through the children and through, you know, and that's probably what I don't want for my future children is I want to break that cycle. I want to kind of nip it in the bud and not have to like struggle, you know, but this day and age is pretty hard not to as well. Like, you know, COVID, inflation, like, you know, everyone's just doing the best that they can.
Oh my God, they really are.
Like, world.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, nothing like what people have gone through in past generations, but it's interesting hearing you talk about losing two people that were so important to you. There's so much self-awareness, ironically, in like the way you talk about it, because I think it would be natural for a lot of people to hold a lot of anger and resentment towards their mum in particular. Did you always have that type of relationship with your mum's passing, or has that taken work to get there and to understand the realities of generational trauma and the impact that had on her?
think because I had to grow up quickly, I was aware of my surroundings, and I was aware, like I used to watch people. I analyze people all the time. And I used to, I guess, like analyze people's actions. And sometimes I think people's actions aren't really reflective of who they are. They may be just hurting, and they may be just like they're, projecting. So I guess with that side, I've always just naturally been a pretty empathetic person, like putting myself in other people's shoes from a young girl into my adult life. Like I think one of the responses from trauma is obviously post-traumatic, disorder or whatever, PTSD. And one of the trauma responses that I had was that I went mute for 2 years and I didn't talk. So I was living inside my head. So the only person that was like the biggest enemy in the world to anyone that I thought was just myself. Like I was just like fighting myself and not thinking that I was worthy, not thinking I was good enough. Like I was bounced around, I was moved around. I was with a dad that didn't genuinely want me kind of thing. So you can imagine that taking a toll. And so I was just like always in my head, and I think that's kind of where I was like, I need to I guess I just picked myself apart a little bit, which is not a very healthy way to live and to do things. But that's kind of where it sort of started. I was like, well, I don't want to be my own enemy kind of thing. And I just read books and things about myself, and the mute part was really difficult because I guess you don't talk, so you're in your head. And I also could never express anger. So when I get angry, even now, like as a 29-year-old, I just cry. Like if I'm really frustrated, I'm really angry about something, I would just cry. And so I could never feel angry at anything. And so I was like, okay, why am I crying? Like, why am I upset? And I just would unpack that with myself constantly. So it's just been a journey, I guess, like over the years, trying to better understand myself and how I respond to things. So like knowing that I was like, oh, I'm angry, but like, why am I crying? So that was a response. And like, I'm trying to break down that barrier now. It's like, I'm allowed to feel angry, like,
100%.
Because I think this is where it kind of extends from when we were talking about my childhood, like, is when I saw anger, I saw people get hurt. I saw people get hit. Like violence was very prominent in my family, which I'm very open to talking about. And I know that it's a trigger for some people because, I mean, we know how much women experience domestic violence these days, and the statistics are really high. But that's what I saw when I was younger, is like people getting hurt and people, and so I didn't want to like allow that feeling because I was like kind of like traumatized but like triggered by it. So it's knowing your own triggers. And I think along the way, I just constantly questioned myself, like all the time, like no one else. Like I'm not questioning anyone else's things. I'm just questioning my own shit. Like I'm just like, why the freaking hell do I do that? Or especially in relationships, I like push people away, or I'm like, when I feel like upset by something that they've done, instead of being like, I'm upset by this, it's like, oh, like, no, everything just needs to go away, like, because it's just like too much for me, because I'm like, well, no, like I can do this myself. And I have a current partner and he's so beautiful, and he just said to me the other day, literally, like, I wish you weren't so independent because I feel like I have nothing to offer you right now. Like, and I'm like, you love and support me, and that's all that matters. But that's my problem, is that because I've just been in my head so much for my whole childhood and high school life, self-reflecting, self-analyzing, all that sort of stuff, it's kind of created this like self-reliance, independence, which is positive in some ways, but in other ways it's kind of bittersweet. Like
creates boundaries, and maybe not always the healthiest
not good ones. I guess because I didn't have a lot of boundaries when I was younger. I created these boundaries for myself to protect myself, and now I'm not letting like other people come in because I'm like, no, like you cannot come into my space. The gates are closed.
I feel like we all develop those coping mechanisms, all these behaviours as a response to our childhood. And it's only when you start, well, actually, particularly, I think for myself and I think, Jess, you've probably experienced this as well, when you start to have children, it can be really confronting seeing the way you parent or reflecting on things that you learned that you don't want to pass down.
Yeah.
How do you go about unlearning behaviours or recognising there are behaviours or coping mechanisms that maybe served you and were really important when you were little that you need to let go of now?
Yeah, this is a really good one, like great question, because this is something that I've only kind of hit right now. And it's that basically the coping mechanism that I learned much younger was that protective safety. So safety was something that I sought and something that I created for myself. And that's what I look for in like anything, like my relationships, my career, my financial, which is a generally like, you know, can be a really positive thing because it protects you from all of these things. But I guess like I'm just really easy to sort of push people away. I'm really critical because like sometimes in my work I'm, you know, if I feel valued or feel like I'm of value, I'm like, well, then like I don't want to be a part of that. And sometimes it can be like people can sort of misinterpret that, I guess, like, and you feel misinterpreted because I guess I go through my whole life being like, be as genuine and nice as you treat people with respect. And I do the same thing, but I can just also be on the other side of that, like really critical of people because I'm like, that's the safety thing that I've created for myself. So that's one thing. I mean, boundaries is another thing we spoke like briefly on. I didn't have a lot of boundaries when I was younger, so creating these boundaries now, like they weren't always like the most healthiest, I guess. I found myself in very compromising positions, you know, more when I was younger, I think in high school, like risk behavior, you know what I mean? Like it's just, you test the boundaries. And because I didn't have parental guidance or I didn't have a lot of people like, so I was allowed to do it, right? I was just like, you know, not like I was like off doing drugs and stuff like that. I actually did the opposite. I stayed away from, this is like going like overshare, but like I thought if you have sex, you will get pregnant. Obviously. But like I was like, I'm not having sex the whole high school life because I do not want to get pregnant. And I was also queer, so I was like, I don't even want to have sex with boys anyways, they're gross. Like I was like, yuck. But that was weirdly a boundary that I put in place when I was like 15. Like all my friends were like, you know, doing their little thing and I was like, oh, absolutely not. Like absolutely not. And it was other things like I don't want to drink because I'm a bit of a control person. Like I don't like drinking because I feel like if I lose control, therefore I lose everything in my life. Like that's how irrational sometimes like my brain can be. So I just put these like little weird boundaries and like mechanisms in place throughout my life. And my memoir, Big Love, really kind of unpacks all of them. And when I was writing that book, it was so cathartic because I was like, oh my God, I realized like so many things that I did which were good at the time and created such a safety network for me and also such a safety net for me when I was younger. But now like I can kind of let go of them. Like I can kind of, not that I'm going to go to do like risk behavior, but like, you know, I'm like so stingy with my money because I'm like, well, I've got to make a little go a long way, and I will run something so far down to it's like not even like, you know, shoes, clothes, like makeup, like I'm scraping it out because I'm like, I so like was so frugal when I was younger because I didn't have a lot. So now I'm like, oh, I could just go buy, which is a good place to live. So they're all positive, but I think the most negative one is like the whole not letting people in. It's the lack of trust that I have that is creating a huge barrier in my personal and love life as well.
Yeah, definitely. You touched on before that you identify as queer, and we were reading that when you were on The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, they put a label on you of bisexual. How is your relationship with your identity as a queer person evolved over,
Yeah,
years.
I know. It's crazy. Like, I guess when Australia first met me in 2018, which was The Bachelor, the Honey Badger season, he didn't pick anyone. I guess my queerness was sort of exploited and sort of like, kind of not exploited, but it was made to be like this really big deal. But the contrast of that when I was, back home in my footy career, like my footy life, my footy community, my work, like everyone knew that I was gay. I did have to say it. Everyone knew I had a girlfriend or a partner, whether it was a guy or a girl. Like no one gave two shits.
Yeah.
And so it was such a crazy thing for when I went on The Bachelor, for my whole sexuality to be sort of semi-exploited in a way that it was just like it made it out to be this big deal. And it was like Brooke's big secret, Brooke's bombshell. And I was like, and I get TV, so it's such a contrast, like it's such a contrasting world, I guess. Like when you live your life so comfortably and you understand that sexuality is a spectrum and you can sit wherever you would like to sit, when then there's this other world, which is like the TV world, which is actually probably reflective of like society in some way, that it's a big deal for everyone to like see a queer person on TV. And I guess I realized the part that I played in that and was like, okay, I can break down some walls and some barriers here by showing how comfortable I am with just being whoever I want to be. And, and that has sort of evolved. And then being asked to be the bisexual bachelorette was, I didn't take that position lightly. Everyone knows how much I took such took that with care and responsibility. But the word bisexual was not something that I really, really, really defined myself with. I wasn't like, hi, I'm Brooke, like I'm bisexual. Like, I was always like, I'm Brooke. And then, people were like, oh, do you have a partner? I'm like, yeah, I have a girlfriend. And then they're like, oh, are you lesbian? Like, and I'm like, no, I'm just Brooke. Like, that's just my partner. And she was this, back in the day, she was the same. So it was just like over the years. And then, months later, I'd have a boyfriend, like whatever. Like, you were young. Like you just, so I was always like, my footy, like community knew this. We never really spoke about it. We didn't really care. No one really cared. My family didn't care. But the TV world, they really, wanted that to be emphasized. And I get it because we don't have a lot of queer representation. And that's the thing that I really pride myself on, is that representation matters. Like to see for young people to see themselves is so important. To like, or even just like break down those like little stigmas and barriers. Personally, I identify with more, I guess, like, to put me on a spectrum of where I'd more sit would be pansexuality, which is just like, I love anyone, like girl, guy. And, I've dated all types of people that are on the gender spectrum. So it doesn't really, bisexuality kind of boxes you. And I think I get that TV needed that sort of defining thing to like I guess sell. But it's just like so annoying because I knew that, I'd have to live with that title forever. And that would be something that, that would be to my name for a very long time, which is fine. I have no problem with it because I'm all about supporting the queer community and representing them. But I know that also like we as people evolve differently, and sexuality is a spectrum. Gender is a spectrum. Like we change jobs and life like so quickly. Like 1 minute you could do one thing and then next you could be doing a completely different thing. I didn't think that I'd be here. So it's just like, it's hard because you're constantly having to redefine yourself. And when you're a public figure or when you're someone that is in the public, it's much harder to do that. So like if you're just in your community and I'm like, hey, I'm not going to do youth work anymore, I'm just going to go work in finance, my family would be like, no worries, all good, you do you. But then you have to sort of like this pressure when you're a public figure, you have to like announce it and it's like such a big deal and it's like, but like, and they want to know like why and like how and stuff like that, where your family just don't really care.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
we people don't really, your people don't really care what you want to do. So that was a really hard thing, but I am constantly like redefining myself. Like it's not like I'm never like complacent with who I am. It's just like I'm always wanting to do as much as I can in the life that I can. You know what I mean? So like that also comes from my childhood. My mum passed away when she was 34 years old and I'm nearly 30.
Wow.
And my sister, who also passed away like two and a bit years ago,
I'm so sorry.
she was only 33. So they're like really short-lived, like short lives lived. And I think every day or when I wake up or every year that I turn a birthday, I'm like, am such a privilege of aging and to getting older and to, you know, eventually start my life, but like to my family and stuff like that. Like I think it's such a privilege. Like
Definitely.
yeah, don't definitely take it for granted.
Yeah, that's beautiful. There's a quote that we talk about sometimes that is, if you don't define your story, others will define it for you. And I know you've spoken about how you had to redefine yourself after The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. Can you talk a little bit about that and what your story you want it to be?
Yeah. Well, Big Love was reclamation. So like I purposely put on my memoir on the front cover, like reclaim myself, my people, my culture, because that's what it was about. Because tabloids and news will write the most horrific and I guess like twisted, manipulated things about you, and that can just like change someone's mental health like instantly. And I was just like so sick of it. I was like, oh yeah, these people really don't care about my mental health, but I do, so I can do something about that. And I guess, you know, people had all, you know, written all these like trauma stories and, you know, Brooke's traumatic life, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I don't really define myself like that. Like I had pretty hard childhood, but I'm sure there's other people that have had just as tough childhoods too and are really happy to where they've gotten. So I was like, I didn't set myself to be any different. But when people rewrite things about you and twist things and change things, I was just getting really angry about it. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to rewrite my story. And I'd always wanted to write a book. And so I did it. And when I first held that thing, like physically, it was like such a really big moment in my life, because I was like, okay, this is the real me. Yeah, like whoever reads Big Love will know the real me, like will know what I've been through and how I think, because they're inside my head. Like they know what I was going through during The Bachelorette. They know what I was going through The Bachelor, and even they know more when my mum died. Like my inner dialogue is basically put into that book. And reclamation is really important for me because I do believe in that. I guess I love that quote, but I also love like you are the author of your own story. So it's like write it how you want to. Yeah. Like I don't know what's gonna. I'd love to write another book and it be the chaos of your 20s, because they were the most chaotic years of my life. And they'll be so different to what you write in or what you read in Big Love. But that's like life. It's like sometimes dysfunctional and like, so it's like takes you in an absolute ride.
I really love that concept to sort of wrap us on, like reclamation, especially like we know it's predominantly women listening to this, and that need to reclaim your story is a need shared by a lot of women, and even more so women of colour. Like it's just, that's the experience. Constantly trying to claim back what's yours and rewrite it in the way that you feel is suitable.
Exactly.
Are there any tips? Feels like such a stupid word, but I don't have another one.
No, it's fine.
You know, not everyone's going to have the capability to write a book. What would you do if you were someone listening today that felt like, I need some of this power back in my life? How do I reclaim my power?
Ooh, how do you go? I mean,
no biggie, just a small, how do I reclaim my total life and existence and power?
Just
sentences.
claim your existence. I guess like standing in your truth is something that came to my full like mind first. Is like there'll be like some experiences that you've had or you've done that don't really define who you are as a person. And I think like for me, I have to talk about my childhood and I have to talk about this stuff a lot, and I'm fine and I'm capable with, but it's something that I don't really identify with my day and age now. Like I was that happened, and I'm okay to like leave it in the past. So I think like letting go of things that don't serve you is one of the things that I really love. But you know, sometimes you do have to dig in there when you're doing the work. Like when we spoke about like you like facing the ugly kind of thing, you have to like do the work, and sometimes you have to dip into that. But don't let that part of you, like your past, really define where you're going into the future. And I think my tips and tricks, or whatever you want to call it, like is just owning it. First of all, owning your life. Yeah, it's such a hard thing. Yeah, I mean, I guess women of color, there's like this such a negative, well, not negative, but there's like this stereotype that we have to like hold a lot of responsibility for our communities and hold a lot of like power, and we're not allowed to feel soft and not to like kind of crumble.
Like you have to constantly be strong. That's the expectation.
Yeah. And what I've realized is that I have been doing that. Like I'm the matriarch of my family. I'm the only woman that kind of holds my family together. But I've also realized that sometimes I also need help, and I'm okay to lean in, and it's just finding your people that you lean in and that sort of stuff. So I don't know. I feel like to know your capabilities is to like have really that self-awareness, which is what we talk about. And I think to dive into self-awareness, you have to sort of like kind of be brave enough and courageous enough to like kind of face it and not be scared. Like it's a pretty scary thing, like unpacking who you are. I know
It's huge.
yeah, like I think, you know, people, like I said, over glamorize it. Like it's journaling every day.
It's such a privileged lens to look at
It is.
that through, isn't
It's
it?
a great lens.
Yeah,
Like I
it's a
mean,
helpful
I
tool.
journal every day, and sometimes my journal looks very ugly. Like it looks like I'm really mad today. But you know, when you will reread that like in 2 weeks forward and you read back to that time, you're like, oh, I'm actually glad for that, because it makes you appreciate the good days. I don't know what the tip would be, but I think standing in my truth was something that came to my full front, is just like owning who you are and not feeling like you need to put on this like face and this facade and this shield. You know, like
I love that answer.
we're very human.
Yeah.
So human.
Like it's okay to be vulnerable and ask for help, which so many of us struggle with.
Vulnerability is actually a strength. I've realized, like, I've never been afraid to be vulnerable, because I'm like, well, people are either going to like you or don't.
Yeah.
And if you're like just who you are and what you are and say what you are, and then people who don't like that, that's their own shit. Like that's not you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a them problem.
100%. Like I don't. Yeah.
Our last question for today that we ask every guest is, what does it mean to you to be selfish?
Selfish? Oh. The first word that came was prioritization.
I like it.
Yeah.
Strong
So that's
start.
my Capricorn brain coming through. It's like, yep. I guess to be selfish is to prioritize what's important. And if it's yourself and you think that's selfish, do it. That's it.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for
That's
time
all right.
today. It was a really good conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was
Thanks so
actually
much.
such a pleasure. Thanks.
This episode of Selfish was recorded on Wurundjeri land. Always was, always would be Wurundjeri land.